All right. Welcome, everybody. Oh, Richard, there you are. Sneaking in. Good afternoon. This is officially meeting number 12 of the technical working group for the Broward Safety Action Plan. Yeah, it was a 14th on the calendar, but we skipped a couple of meetings. So we have a very dynamic, tightly timed meeting today. We have a variety of presentations. And so in the past, I used to like pick a tie to indicate what's going on with the meeting. Today, it's my shirt, that there's a variety of colors. And so there's a variety of presentations today. And so if you don't like one, it'll be done in 5 minutes. And you can look at my shirt if you need something interesting to see. So, but I'll have Christine Fanchi go through that presentation. By the way, I'm James Cormar. I'm with the Broward MPO. A couple of things for the record. Those of you sitting up there, you can see the presentation if you use the mouse and click presentation on the upper left corner of the screen. So you can at least see that. We also shared the meeting agenda with the members of our oversight committee. And so we have Ken Reinhardt, who is the chair of our Citizens Advisory Committee, also with Smart Growth. And he is a member of the oversight committee, but he's here as part of the public. We also have a few other people from the technical working group. We have Rachel Solomon and Leah Darial. I said that wrong. And then we have Max Goldstein and Sean Deneen from City of Sunrise, who are oversight committee members, and also Josh Freeman, who's one of the consultants. Actually, we have a few of the consultants on, right? Okay, and Ricardo Gutierrez. So because this is your technical working group meeting, you are the focus of the meeting. And so we will build in time for public comment. So those from the oversight committee or others from the public who are observing will build in some time. There's a little trick that Christine's going to explain. We're going to be using Slido during the meeting also to throw in questions. So Ken and the others, you can slip in some questions in Slido. But we will try to reserve some time for public comment for the observers today. With that, let me hand this over to Christine Fanchi, and she'll explain more of the details of the agenda.
All right. Happy February. Let's do this. So I've got 2 sections. I think you saw your agenda. Does everybody have an agenda with a Slido on it? Okay, so keep that in front of you. First off, I'm going to have Mariah Deacle with our team talk over our policy assessment that we've done to get to safer streets. And then we're going to jump into like a modified lightning round, I'm calling it, to get the 8 focus plans presented this afternoon in a timely way. So thank you to Miguel and Basel for helping us time and keep on track. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Mariah.
Thanks, Christine.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mariah Deacle on the WSP team, and I will talk as quickly as I can, but happy to answer any questions at the end. I know you have a heavy agenda this afternoon. And before we get started, I just want to say thanks so much, because several of you in this room probably responded to the BMPO's initial solicitation and sent out a couple of questions to the local municipalities and the partners as far as what policies are in place. And so thanks for all your responses and your help there. So where we're at right now is phase 1 of the policy assessment is really just an inventory. And phase 2 will then capture all of the recommended policies based on all the other work that you're going to hear about after I speak. So part of phase 1, we realized that we needed to develop some type of definitions. What's a policy? What's a standard? What's a regulation? Because it started to, the lines started to blur a little bit. So just as a reminder, the policies establish the vision and the guiding principles. Regulations and ordinances enforce the vision through legal mechanisms. Standards provide those technical specifications needed for consistent application. So here we are, phase 1, we have a nice draft inventory of what is existing today. Phase 2 is going to do a little further assessment, look at some of the criteria, look at the needs and the various focus plans throughout the process of all the other projects that this SS4A project incorporates. So you can see on the map here, the goal is green. We want green everywhere. And right now you can see clearly that's not the case. So this is the inventory, the snapshot of the inventory. So the first round of solicitation that BMPO sent out was, does your city or does the county have complete streets policies, Vision Zero policies or standards, and then a safe system approach? And so those are the three categories that we first started looking at. And then further on, we started to refine it a little bit more, and we wanted to know, how are these things being implemented? What are the mechanisms? What are the requirements for maybe the developers and the public works departments? What are the internal ways of getting things done? So with our initial assessment, we included these three sections, and then this is kind of an expanded version in round 2, where then we wanted to know, did you adopt a policy? Do you have a complete streets policy? Do you have ordinances in place? Does your comp plan reference complete streets or Vision Zero? So you can kind of see across the matrix. With the Vision Zero, with the complete streets, it's a much more robust than Vision Zero throughout the county, is what we learned through this process. So this one looks a little lonely, right? And then not a whole lot happening with the Vision Zero. So how do we get there? How do we get everything in the green? How do we have all the municipalities participate? And that's why we're here. So we're still working through the process. Several of the entities do have the complete streets, like I said, and some of them lack alignment. And clearly, the recommendation at this time is to develop something that's going to be consistent throughout the county. If that's possible, that would be the goal. So after we looked at local, then we wanted to take a look at national. So what's happening? And it was kind of hard to not go down the rabbit hole of, well, what about in Europe? What about, so we focused on the US and Florida. And we looked at other places. What are they doing? What are the outcomes? What could be deemed successful? And what policies do they have in place? So we took that and we did a comparison analysis of what is here local and came up with some ideas. High-level ideas of what could be done in Broward County. And for example, New York has had success with some neighborhood slow zones, Fremont, California. There's a lot of places throughout the country. And then just here in Florida, also Miami-Dade and Tampa have done some good work as well in this realm. So this is our high level identification of what could potentially become of policies through this process. So neighborhood slow zones was a big one. Pedestrian safety action plans. There are some floating around out there. The high injury network is something I know that this is focusing on, that Christine has been working very hard on. The Vision Zero education campaign, that was one of the comments that we heard back from the county's reviewers, was that the educational piece needs to be combined as well. So we've made note of that. So this gives you an idea of kind of where we're headed. And then with the next steps, these are the 5 buckets, as Christine likes to call it, and how do we touch on each bucket for safer people, safer speeds, safer roads, vehicles, and so on. And with that, we do have a draft of what that could potentially look like with the policies in these 5 buckets. And we also have a draft resolution for a complete streets policy or a Vision Zero policy that we're happy to share with local municipalities or partners if they so choose to adopt these locally. And then the next steps will be to adopt the Broward Safety Action Plan, Safe Streets Design Manuals, something that the team has been working on as well. And then, of course, you have your amendment opportunities with your comp plan, code of ordinances, and LDRs or LDCs. So there's lots of opportunities to incorporate policies or enhance what you may already have existing. So it's just something to think about moving forward in the future. How is that going to be implemented? And with the implementation, there will be a 4-phase approach. So the assessment and preparation. There is a federal highway safe system policy-based toolkit that the BMPO has shared with us that has a nice way of aligning and looking at various criteria for policy development. So that's something that we're going to consider. Phase 2 would be to pilot these projects and implement to see what could work, what could potentially need adjustments. Then with your full implementation, you want to incorporate what you're doing into your policies and regulations. And then also continuously monitoring is something that is always important. So how do you put that into like the work plan of the local municipalities, maybe for monitoring, for reporting? I know that with federal and state requirements for funding, that sort of thing, like grant requirements, you always have your quarterly and annually reporting, progress reports, that type of thing. So there's various ways of approaching that. And I think this is the last slide. Yes. Okay. So I hope I didn't talk too fast. Happy to answer any questions that you have and look forward to working with you all in the future. Any questions? I don't know if that's a good thing.
So I'm going to throw in something. So this was an effort that Broward MPO started to undertake a few years ago. Amanda, you're familiar with that, of understanding who had complete streets policies and other policies in place, and then what could happen to make those stronger. So that was the inventory. We thank everybody for providing information on that. And I know there have been some discussions about what should go forward or what could go forward to become regulatory, what becomes a guideline and such. So I think we'll be getting more information on that, but we just wanted to encourage. I mean, we thought it was great that a lot of cities supported complete streets and had resolutions of support or adopted guidelines, but then to make those, I'm not going to use the right terminology, Mariah, to make them standards or
Standards and policies.
yeah, there's some extra steps that need to happen. I think Fort Lauderdale's done quite a bit. I think maybe Deerfield Beach too. So, but that's the question for local governments to figure out how much and how willing they are to give more teeth to the guidelines and recommendations.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So I guess I would just follow up by asking, Mariah's putting together kind of a draft resolution of support with the fill in the blanks for all the agencies to have to adopt zero. And then we're also obviously going to create the Broward Safety Action Plan for you to adopt locally. We'll also have the Safe Streets Design Manual for you to adopt locally. Do you have any advice on how those would go through your agency? Do you just need the Safe Streets Design Manual and then you'll adopt it, or is there a process to adopt that? So any advice from local so that we can give you the right resources?
For thought, I guess, to think about and maybe report back next month. If you all could think about it and let us know the best process for that, and they'll keep that in mind while they're preparing everything. So the next speaker is oh, do we have questions online?
Or do you want to ask if people have questions online? There's no questions yet. Are there questions online?
By the way, those of you that have signed up for Slido, we do have our BMPO guest Wi-Fi available, which is still not working for me. So
Question? Oh, there's a hand.
could you click on your microphone, please? And state your name. You're covering for Christina Miskus today, right?
Thank you. If you can't tell, this is my first time. So I'm covering for Christina Miskus. I'm Mary Knowles with the South Florida Regional Planning Council. I had a question about the design standards. So on the chart you displayed, it said that most municipalities, if not all, don't have any. So is the goal of the action plan also to provide design standards to help scoot that along?
Yeah. So we are planning to draft a design manual. And there's been a lot of discussions about guidelines, manuals, or standards, right? And the experience with the MPO for the Complete Streets guidelines is that people adopted them, but then they maybe weren't using them as much as we would like, right? And so maybe we're going to take it one step further and do a manual and hope that that is a little bit more prescriptive, but not as prescriptive as standards, to give engineers flexibility to be able to figure out how to meet the manual requirements. So, but we're just starting the manual. We presented chapter 2 in December to this group. And so we're kind of really getting started on kind of what will be included in it. So we look forward to working with you to make sure that the scope of that is good. We're not going to create standards with this project, but if there's a demand for it, let James know, and I'm sure they'll figure it out. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that was perfect. Thank you.
Anything else? If not, I'm going to move forward because we have a lot more on the agenda. Thank you, Mariah. Welcome, Ramari. Good to see you. So the second phase of our afternoon is going to be the action plan overview and outcomes. We've got 8 speakers within the 2 hours, but they're each going to get 5 minutes each. We're going to use Slido. Hopefully you have it on your agenda. I'm not going to keep it up there all the time, but on your agenda in front of you, there's a QR code. If you just take a picture or whatever, use your camera, click on the link, it'll take you right to our page. We're going to do 5 minutes of presentation, and then we're going to do a 2-minute break to give you time to put in your questions so that you can pay attention during the 5 minutes and you're not distracted by making questions. So you'll have 2 minutes after each 5 minutes to put in your questions, and then we'll start the next round. If somebody has a clarifying question only, because we only have 2 minutes, they're welcome to ask that, but let's be quick. Then after 4 presentations, we're going to do a 20-minute Q&A, and then we'll do the same thing, right? So we can get 4 20-minute Q&A, and then 4, and then 20-minute Q&A. And then I need 5 minutes at the end to wrap us up. So with that, are we ready, Miguel? Are you ready, James?
Go.
Okay. We're going to start off with the Rail Safety Action Plan. Unfortunately, Thomas Rodriguez is stuck on a plane, so you get Christine Fanchi from WSP. The Rail Safety Action Plan was necessary because we have obviously 2 rail lines, and we unfortunately have a lot of killed and serious injury crashes. The data for rail comes from the FRA. It does not come from Signal 4, so this was a unique data set. In the 5 years that we studied, 2018 to 2022, we had 66 fatalities, so we have about 12 people killed every year from trains. Unfortunately, the data is interesting because they use the word casualty. You can see on the bottom left here, and it means a person killed or injured. So the data set is like completely different than we are used to looking at. And as you know, in Broward, we have the Tri-Rail line, I'll call it, which is west of 95, and that's run by South Florida Rail. And then we have the Eastern line, the Flagler line, which is owned by FEC. And so we did our analysis based on that. The main issue is kind of broken into 2 cases. We have crossing incidents at road crossings of the rail, and then we kind of had between crossing incidents, right? And so what we found was that the county MPO has the FRA grant, Federal Rail Association grant, to really handle the grade crossings. So upgrading the gates, adding lights, adding signals and markings and signage and all kinds of delineators, median noses, reflectors. And so there's kind of funding there. The real thing that opportunity we identified was really between those crossings, right? People are able to really navigate between those crossings very easily. We have really inconsistent fencing, inconsistent uses on both sides that are attracting. If you know, like the south of here in like Hollywood, there's kind of like a park-like area between Dixie highways. You've got Dixie Highway north and south, and then just kind of like beautiful green grass and a high-speed train in the middle. So it's very inviting. And so really the majority of the action that we've identified is the opportunity to really like seal off the corridor. We heard from FEC mostly that they don't really love fencing. They've had issues with it. And so they recommended working with the adjacent cities and property owners to put in landscaping, even thorny landscaping. I know we worked doing that on median sometimes, but really doing a combination of fencing and landscaping, either right on the FEC line or within the city adjacent property. We've identified 6 locations, as you can see here on the bottom right, that are identified as priority locations. 1, 2, and 3 are within the FEC. No, that's wrong. Sorry. East Atlantic in Pompano is FEC. Hardy Park is FEC. Prospect Road and Powerline is FEC. I'm sorry. Southwest 3rd and 11th. Prospect Road is Tri-Rail. I'm sorry, is SFRC. And then number 4, Southwest 3rd Avenue at Southwest 11th Street in Hallandale is FEC, excuse me. Number 5, West Cypress Creek Road is the Tri-Rail intersection. And then the Fort Lauderdale Tri-Rail Station. Each has a unique scenario. And so within the focus plan, we're able to kind of pick out the strategies, but a lot of them overlap, right? So fencing was a big one for all of them, making sure we have connected sidewalk or pedestrian zones, so people aren't walking in the road as they cross where the tracks are, making sure there's enough lighting, there's enough delineation between the modes, and making sure that we're kind of separating those modes to make it as safe as possible. We talked about a couple things for program and policy. Program enforcement, they were really impressed with the Broward County Sheriff's Enforcement Blitz that they did a few years ago, where they did it for 3 months and they had 0 fatalities. So really trying to amp up those actions. And then under policy, there was a lot of discussion about the dynamic envelope striping and how we had that test on Commercial Boulevard by FDOT with the yellow, and then we thought we liked it, and then the METCD came out and it only allowed white. So we put it as a policy recommendation to really rethink that, because a lot of people were saying you can't see the dynamic envelope, you know, our pavements. Oh, I'm out of time. All right. Thank you very much. Now you have 2 minutes to go in Slido if you have a question. If you have any clarifying questions.
Yeah, we can take verbal questions too, real quick, since they're in Slido. Brad.
Yeah, the last 2 years of data, noticed that it was 2022. Was that a FRA data limitation, missing 23 and 24?
So when we started the project in early 24, the last full years were through 2022, because 2023 data wasn't available in January of 24. So for Signal 4, we used through 2022. So we matched that with the FRA data, so that we'd have the same 5 years for the whole plan. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just it's been a bad last 2 years.
Yes.
So it's missing some pretty.
Yeah, I think it's still astonishing that we have 12 people killed in Broward by trains every year. Like, that just blows my mind. Like, that's a lot.
The one thing I was going to mention, Indian River County has like the most safety enhancements for their bright line crossings. They'd be a good like example of
Okay.
things they've done there.
Yeah.
Pedestrian exit gates, second train warning signs.
Okay.
They kind of have, they have the highest speed section, you know, 125
Mhm.
there. So be a good reference point to see a lot of the stuff they've been doing.
Thank you. All right. Without further ado. Oh, we have 30 seconds.
Christine, can you clarify what a incident is?
This FRA data is unique. So incident is a crash in FRA data, right? But a casualty means they were killed or injured. Does that make sense? So incident could be anything. Like if I tripped and fell and hit my head, right? That's an incident. But if I trip and broke my arm, then that's a casualty.
Will they have an incident but not be injured?
Correct.
Thank you.
No problem.
Right, next. Neighborhood Safety Action Plan.
All right. Sokoa, you're on.
Great. Good afternoon. Sorry, I'm missing all the fun being in person. Can you hear me well? Great. So I would like to start with, this may be a question to many of you. Why neighborhood safety action is considered as one of the 9 focus plans in our projects. So before I answer that questions, I would like to give you one statistics. We have about 10% of the KSI crashes happening on the local roads. If this number is not astounding to you, I would like to add one more statistics. 83% of all the roads in Broward County are local roads. So we are talking about a lot of portions of our roadway network, local roads, which is experiencing about 10% of the crashes. So this is important, and this is important mainly for many other reasons. So like you may do a trip without a collector or without driving on a freeways, but you cannot complete a trip without going through local roads. So local road is something that's important for each and every trip. If we cannot ensure safety on all local roads, that means we definitely cannot ensure safety for the entire county MPO or roadway network. So local road is really, really important. Now, what we needed to know, what kind of crashes are happening on local roads, where are they actually happening, what kind of people are involved on these neighborhood crashes, are they coming from other regions, or are those cutting through the neighborhood? So all these questions, basically, we try to understand the issues associated with neighborhood crashes. Then for doing that, we looked into Signal 4 analytics data, 2018 to 2022. In the middle column, you are seeing all those statistics. We have 521 KSI crashes in those 5-year period. If you look into some of the data, for instance, 14% fatality is still a lot. If we consider with all kind of crashes happening on our county, the fatality rate is 20%, but you would expect it much, much lower given the local roads are very low in the speed limit, 25 mph or 20 mph or 30 mph. So you would expect it to be lower, but it's like 14% fatality rate shows that we have a lot to do in our local roads to ensure safety over there and ensure our progress towards target zero approach. So we conducted a hotspot analysis, basically, which is a density-based crashes approach to identify which are the most dense areas in our county, which are experiencing the most clustered number of crashes. And we identified city of Fort Lauderdale, city of Hollywood, and city of Plantation has the highest 3 density of the crashes. So then we looked into the solution side of our safety action plan. What can we do? We started with FHWA traffic calming measures. We identified in total 16 countermeasures, starting with horizontal deflections, vertical deflections, routing restrictions, road narrowing. So we considered all possible counter measures applicable to our study areas. And then we looked into how we can implement that. We followed safe system approach. We just not only implemented countermeasures in our study areas where crashes happens, but we also considered where they may happen. What could be the potential future safety crash locations. So we looked into all those, and then we implemented countermeasures in our safety areas. Then next thing we looked at, like what could be some policy level recommendations that may not be implemented into the countermeasures, but could be provided for the future guidelines. We determined speed limit reduction could be one of the really, really important recommendations, because we noticed aggressive driving, speeding are one of the major issues in the Signal 4 data. Then we also determined traffic calming manual adoptions countywide, so as the design standards countywide would be really important if we wanted to ensure our neighborhoods are safe. In addition, we considered 2 long-term recommendations as well. particularly related to reduce cut-through traffic, like encouraging policies to reduce system-wide congestions
Sokoa,
and to ensure cut-through traffic.
5 minutes are up. Sokoa, thank you. We're going to
Okay.
take questions now.
And once again, if you're online, you can go to slido.com and the code is 3522618 if you would like to submit a question.
In the interest of time, I submitted a question, so. Is it showing up, Christine? Oh, okay. So, Sokoa, can you clarify which areas of the 3 cities have the highest density of crashes? It's not all of Fort Lauderdale, not all of Plantation.
No. So Fort Lauderdale, we considered the area near I-95. We have a specific neighborhood over there. We considered the entire neighborhood on city of Fort Lauderdale.
And Karen, you can tell the name of it's not Dorsey River Bend, it's Durs, yeah.
Yeah,
All of theirs
yeah, that's the one.
that had that discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
And Plantation and Hollywood?
Yeah, so Durs is the neighborhood for Fort Lauderdale. On Hollywood, we considered a area near Hollywood Boulevard and Pembroke Road, and then First Avenue and 26th Avenue. And then on the Plantation, we considered the area between Sunrise Boulevard and Broward Boulevard, and then between Turnpike and State Road 7.
And then how can cities that were not on the worst 3 list use the data?
So what we have done is, like in our report, we have analyzed in 2 approaches. One is
You know what, Sokoa? Time's up. We're going to come back to that question then. So
Okay, I'll wait for the 20-minute slot.
Great. Next, we have Ms. Selena Simon.
this is brutal, huh? Survivor.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending this fast-paced session. Today, I'm here to talk about the Lighting Safety Action Plan, and our goal is to achieve 0 fatalities and serious injury crashes at night in Broward County. To understand the current situation, we examined Signal 4 data between 2018 and 2022, and we focused on nighttime conditions that include dark lighted, dark not lighted, dusk and dawn conditions. And from this data, we identified a total of 2,282 KSI crashes at night, which is about 500 KSI crash per year. While it's evident that most of these crashes occur during daytime, we have a considerable amount, 48%, about half of them occurring during nighttime, specifically during dark lighted condition, highlighting a key area of concern. So when we were diving deeper into the crashes, we found that 70% of the pedestrian crashes happened at night, and 42% of pedestrians involved in a KSI crash at night do not survive. The data also revealed that the most dangerous hour is the first hour before it's dark, and this is the hour with the highest KSI crashes during the day. Finally, we created a high injury network for nighttime conditions only, and this showed that 68% of the KSI crashes are concentrated on only 4% of the roadway segments in the county, and this helped us concentrate and prioritize some action items in the most critical areas. So we identified 4 priority locations, 2 in the county, 1 in state, and 1 in the city. And we went on nighttime field visits, which weren't very safe, to examine the current conditions, and we came up with a big list of issues in those locations. I'm just going to talk about a few of them today. We found out that many locations have lighting only on one side of the street, and the opposite side is completely in dark. We found that we have some uneven brightness throughout the county because in some locations we're still using the old HPS light, which is a little bit warmer and orange tone. In some other locations, they're using the bright LED colors, so that was creating a contrast. From FDOT, we found out that we have a big issue, which is the theft of copper conductors in the county. And we also found that most critical locations, such as sidewalks, intersections, bus stops, are completely in dark. So technically, we need the light to be on. To address these issues, we have developed several recommendations as part of this plan. The first is to implement LED throughout the county because we want to achieve a consistent illumination throughout. We also recommended scheduling frequent maintenance checks to make sure that the lights are on. We recommended replacing the copper conductors with aluminum ones, and we had someone from the county also confirming that this actually works. We recommended performing regular tree canopy management to avoid the overgrown from blocking the light. We also wanted to make sure that all bus stops are lit for higher safety. And we finally recommended to update all the current lighting standards to align with national best practices because we found some discrepancies between the books that we currently use that are a little bit outdated from the current national best practices, such as ASTO GL7 and IES RP 22, which is the latest one. Thank you. We have 1 minute to spare. So do you have any questions, clarifying questions? And we have the Slido as well.
Yep, and for anyone that's online, we're going through this lightning round, and if you want to submit a question, please submit it at slido.com, and the code is 3522618. Once again, it's 3522618.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, for the bus stop, is the recommendation for the stop itself to be lit, or the entirety of the roadway inclusive of the sidewalk and bus stop?
So we recommended that both the sidewalks that lead to the bus stops are lit and the actual bus stop shelter is to be lit. We also recommended to add LED light above the bus stop sign itself. And I think this is now in motion. We are doing that in the counties. They are implementing it already.
Yeah, so that dark not lighted, that's meaning like there's no roadway lighting present on the corridor whatsoever?
That's correct.
Okay.
And dark lighted means we have some light, might not be sufficient though.
And the dark not lighted statistics, I believe that's dependent upon what the police report states, correct?
Yes.
And since I'm gonna also ask a question of Romari too, but I was expecting when we started this that we would see that most of the crashes were occurring where it was dark, not lighted. And Selena with her research has found that what's the percentage that are occurring where it is dark lighted?
So 37% between everything.
So there's lighting, but it might not be sufficient lighting. And Romari with BCT, are those solar powered lighting panels or how does that work?
I think it is. I'll double check with Capital to see if there's any other variants, but it is solar powered.
All right, next.
Thank you very much. I will leave you with Michael King.
Is anybody getting bored? There's no time to get bored, so.
Bored?
Okay. Because if you are, Mike's here, so he's gonna take away all boredom.
I think I was going to go backwards in my presentation to start with the recommendation. So mid blocks, but I don't know what to say about mid block. The thing about mid block is that no one knows what the heck a mid block crossing is. There's the definition and, you know, what between a crossing and a crosswalk and an FDOT METZD approved crosswalk is one issue. And that's one of the things we're having to work through with this sort of action plan. But I think that the big two things are on the left here, which is the first stuff is number one, and I'll just read it: acknowledging, accepting, and accommodating mid crossings. And what we found with working with the TWG and a lot of cities have told us is that there are just not a whole lot of mid-block crossings. And requests for the same have been, there are not a lot of mid-block crossings. So our recommendation, I'll just jump right to it, is to actually have a program that says we need more of these. And I want to set a target number. Maybe we don't, maybe we do, I don't know. But we go through all the requests and somebody sit down and go through all the requests and say, we need to act on all these requests. We want to start with bus stops. We want to say bus stop is like a super cool reason to have a mid-block crossing or have any kind of crossing. FDOT has some really good sort of guidelines, and that kind of gets into this question about what a mid-block crossing is, because the FDOT guidelines, which is METC guidelines, I mean, sort of flow from that, are talking about a warranted crosswalk or crossing. And so that it meets warrants, and warrants are traffic warrants and or people crossing the road warrants. But some of the latest is that those warrants are relaxed or in certain context classifications, which is sort of new. And then kind of this next step, which is, okay, you have a request. Somebody says, I'd like to be able to cross the road here, bus stop or whatever, there's a park. And then somebody says, well, it doesn't meet warrants for a crossing. Then, okay, then what do? Do you just do nothing? Or do you do something else? Do you try to make it safer because you acknowledge, going back to the number one thing, you acknowledge the fact that this is a desire line. And we need to either figure out how to accommodate or make, when people cross the road, make that safer. Or so you can't sort of that it's sort of this cycle. It's just like, okay, then what? Because and it might come into, this is part of the thing, it might come into thinking about land use and thinking about where fences are and where walkways are and where bus stops are. I mean, God forbid we move a bus stop. But what does that mean? And the answer is to answer it. I think the number 4 recommendation is continual funding mechanism, to actually say this should be some sort of a thing that needs to be funded. And that kind of goes back to the target. Like, so if we're going to do, I say 1 per municipality annually. It's just as a start, so that's 32 or 30, something like that. So, and each crossing costs $100,000. So that means we need, what's 30 times whatever? You see, that's why we create targets. So we can do the math. We've identified 3 corridors: Andrews Avenue, Cypress Creek right out here, and Coconut Creek Parkway. Cypress is also known as Northeast 62nd Street. Andrews, we just had a public meeting last night that Basel went to, because they have a project going on with Wilton and Lauderdale. And so that's all, we tagged onto that. I have 6 seconds. 3, 2, 1.
All right, question time.
Clarifying questions.
For anyone that's online, feel free to raise your hand and I can give you permission to speak.
Quick clarifying question is, how did you select the priority projects?
Oh, we talked to BCT. We got their we got their bus lines that people ride a lot. And we found the corridors. So we had to have a bus line. And then we chose Andrews because it had a project. The other one, how did we get to the other one?
Yeah, the other projects I think we selected was, we were trying to identify county facilities. Because by identifying county facilities, we thought as a team that some of those projects could potentially move forward quicker, and we could work with Broward County to develop a process of how to identify those improvements. Right, James?
Yeah, and did you look at mid-blocks on the 11 priority corridors?
Not as part of this thing.
Sorry. As an adjacent, yes.
So that's why we didn't do roads like State Road 7, Broward, 31st.
Did you start the 20 minutes, Barbara?
Yeah.
No, we're still in the 2 minutes.
Sorry.
Gotta wait till the
Quick, throw something at Michael. Any good questions?
dog barks underneath. the dog.
All right, so I'll just go ahead and start the 20 minutes then.
So I was gonna ask the other three speakers the same question. How did you select your priority projects? The code, are you still on the line? You want to start? Still there?
Yes, I'm online and I can start.
If you turn on your camera, we'll see you too. There you go.
So does my time started?
Real quick. How did you select your priority projects?
Okay, so we started looking into which are the cities and towns has the most number of crashes. And then we understand like it is like well dispersed over the county. So then we needed to know actually how concentrated those crashes are. So in order to determine that, we did a ArcGIS based analysis that is called hotspot analysis. So the way it works, like it considered each one of the crashes as one density point, and it looked into the density score of how closely spaced those crashes are. So we looked into the different gradings. We started with like grading number 1 to 9, which means 9 is the highest density and 1 is the lowest density. And the selected 3 study corridors we found are on the 8 and 9 grading score, meaning they are the most dense crashes on those areas.
Thank you. Selena, you want to come? How did you select your priority forward?
So very quickly, we looked at the KSI data and we wanted to select locations that don't have current projects going on, either FDOT or the county. So we looked at the top corridors and we looked at the top intersections, and we wanted to choose one from each jurisdiction for the intersection, which we chose 3, 1 county, 1 city, and 1 state. And then we selected the 1 county corridor.
And then I'll answer for rail. Similar process where we have 2 rail lines. So we wanted to do equal. So we did 3 and 3. And then we prioritize based on casualties, as they call them. So killed and injury crashes, looking for example projects along those 2 corridors. That's where how those 6 were identified. The other question was, how can cities not on the list use data? I don't know who asked this question, if there's a clarifying.
That was regarding neighborhoods.
Neighborhoods.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I can start with that question. So when we started doing the analysis, we looked into 2 ways. One is we looked entirely for the Broward County, and then the other ways we looked into at individual level, each of the municipality. So we tried to understand issues with neighborhood safeties at a county level and then at a municipality level. The analysis we have done for both county level and municipality level are included into the report. In the main report, we provided the county level information, and each of those informations are actually presented for the municipality as well into the appendix. The only difference is that we identified the study corridors based on hotspot analysis for those 3 study areas. That means we provided the countermeasure solutions for those 3 study areas. So we did not do that level of detailed analysis for each of the municipalities, but all the crashes, all the issues, what type of crashes are happening, whether speeding, aggressive driving is being a factor, whether nighttime has more crashes than the regular. Everything has been provided into the report in the appendix.
And I'll just add that we originally had all the safety countermeasures for neighborhood in the neighborhood plan, but we've now taken those out and we're putting them all in the Safe Streets Design Manual so that they're all housed for any kind of countermeasure needed in one document. So you'll be getting that later this year, this fall.
And if I could throw out, the reason I asked about how the cities can use this, a couple of things have come up. Town of Davie, as you see on the list here, it has a lot of fatal crashes, but they're kind of scattered. There's not necessarily a pattern or a density to those. So that was a different situation than the neighborhood in Fort Lauderdale or Hollywood or Plantation. Where there was kind of a grouping and you could see what's going on. And for example, in Plantation, off of State Road 7, sometimes people will cut down 5th Street and then down 46th Avenue. And that's where there were a lot of crashes happening. So we could kind of understand that pattern there. The other city, I talked to somebody at Cooper City and they were wondering to know what was going on with their crashes on local roads. And so as Sakot was saying, we do have a 1-pager for each of the cities.
1 page. Yep.
You can go any city, trying to see who's fourth with which city here, but you can go to that for your city information and then start to dive in and focus on what's going on in your particular city.
And I'll add that we're going to have a resource at the end of the project of the county-wide map that shows the high injury network, the high risk network identified, and then all the KSI crashes mapped on a GIS map by mode, the 4 different modes: cars, bikes, peds, motorcycles. So that when you go to apply for a grant for said road, you can see, is it on the HIN, is it on the HRN, and what types of crashes were happening. Now our data will be 2018 to 2022, but one action is to keep it updated. So we're planning to keep it updated. So, okay, new question. Are these data sets also broken down by other demographics such as age? Who wants to take that? Was that neighborhood as well?
I can answer for neighborhood. We did not broke it down by age because it was not like a consideration in the neighborhood, whether elderly versus young matters in terms of reducing that crashes. We considered each equally, so we did not get into that granular details.
For one of the focus plans in the second half, we did consider age for statistical purposes, but not for the first one. But the other thing is regarding some of the other regarding these safety focus plans and the ones that we're going to speak about later, Christine's going to talk about how we're going to send the plan out for public comment. So we're hoping to get towards posting these studies on our website. Right, James?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I have 12 minutes if anyone has any question they want to ask.
Who asked the age question? Oh, the sake.
I did.
What, was it specific to a particular plan or?
Well, in my prior role, Community Traffic Safety Coordinator with FDOT, I was on the Safe Mobility for Life Coalition, which focused on older, like aging road users. And that was one of the facts, is that the aging road users they were least likely to survive a crash, right? So I was wondering if that was somehow, looked at when it comes to the fatalities.
So we do have that in the larger plan, but it wasn't part of the demographic analysis for each of the focus plans, if that makes sense, except for the school plan that'll be presented next.
Okay.
Yeah, and I could add that it would be a little difficult using signal for data because that does not disclose the age. So that level of personal information would be difficult to consider.
Oh, Christopher.
Hello. Okay, great. Based off of the different action plans that we have, I'm assuming that there's a leading type of work for the prioritized corridors that you have. When the projects get formed into projects, is the scope of the work only going to be like, for example, a lighting project? Is it going to just look at lighting, or are there going to be other scope elements from the other aspects of the action plans incorporated into them?
Do you want to answer that? Sure. So, our scope obviously is the planning phase, right? We looked at the whole data set, and then we looked at these 8 specific data sets and did specific outcomes for each of those. But I believe if you're going to go and do a project, you should look at everything. So the hope is that, as the county and the MPO are partners in this, as we start to implement programs, that we're looking at all of these resources to make sure they're informing our projects as we move. The high injury network, Selena created a nighttime high injury network. I mean, we have lots of resources that come out of this program that can be used to inform all the next steps that we're doing in the county, right? The county has a big intersection program right now. They're able to use this data now. We've got the low stress network that we're coordinating with right now. So there's lots of projects. We're working with the rail grant team also. And we've just got so much is going on, and it's informing so much. I hope that everyone here has learned something over the last 12 meetings so that you're integrating it already into the projects that you have right now and asking good questions about safety, so that we can hopefully make our goal of 0 by 2050. So great question. Let's dig once and fix everything. But
Yes.
I know.
I want to add to that too, Christopher. I don't know if you're going to add, but
I was just going to follow up. So if that is the case, that it's not fully looked at yet, I would just ask that we pad those cost estimates so that when we go to program those projects, there is funding there to be able to construct other parts of the project and not just one aspect of it.
and what Christine was saying about looking at lighting and all these elements on all projects. So our 11 priority corridors, we were at Sterling Road last night in Dania Beach, and there were some comments about safety, and the recommendations for that corridor segment include lighting improvement. Same on Sister and some of these other places. So we're talking about a lighting plan by itself, but then we're going to pull it all into the overall set of recommendations. There's also the priority projects we're hoping serve as kind of templates or examples. And so the 11 priority corridors and all these different things, it's looking at, hey, here's how you can solve some of these issues. And then we hope that clears the path for subsequent implementation in other areas.
James, if I
Yeah.
may. Okay, just to add on to that response. So Broward County recommend that when you look at the mid-block crossing, for example, you are not just look at crossing by itself. You want to install a high visibility crosswalk plus signalize it plus lighting. So all the components need to look at together. And when you propose project, you need to have all the elements together.
And that's where Michael was saying a mid-block crossing could be 100,000. I'm thinking it's going to be up from there. So, yeah, but some could cost that little. So we'll see.
Do we have any questions online?
There's no questions online yet. We do have 7 minutes and 10 seconds to go. If we don't have any questions, I guess
We also have a member of our public here in
Oh,
person, and maybe some of the people online. I don't know, Ken, if you have any comments you want to make or a question. Yeah, come on up to the mic if you don't mind. Ken was very nicely sitting in the audience. So.
Yeah, Ken Reinhardt, member of the public. My overall question here, I was going to wait for later, but this is a good time for it. When all these improvements are made, what's the mechanism for measuring the outcome? Did we achieve what we thought we were going to achieve? That is the question.
So as part of our deliverable, we were putting together the metrics for an annual report that'll have all the metrics of the crash data that we talked about in last month in January with my colleague Michelle. Additionally, we have all the policy programs and projects are listed. And so we're going to be visiting that annually, right? Like where are we achieving, which ones have been achieved, which ones do we need to get started? So we're compiling all that. Also kind of mentioned we're putting together the executive plan and we'll need your review coming up soon. And so in that, I've got the list of all the programs, policies, and programs, excuse me. And then I've got the list of metrics that will help us measure the outcome. Yes. Yes. I think it does leave a hole, Ken. I think you're onto something about how do we evaluate success after we construct the projects. And that's something that I'd love kind of the input of this team of what should we measure, right? One thing that's, close to the heart of safe system is safe speeds, right? So do we want to measure before and after speeds? Do we want to measure before, obviously crashes, but what other data should we as part of the evaluation to understand, to define success, right?
And actually, Christine, I think when we have the thing you're going to talk about at the end, having the document, you will include a list of recommended measures. So we'll want to comment on that.
All right. Well, if there's no more questions, let's go ahead if you're okay with that. So our next speaker is a school. Is Fabian online?
Yeah, Christine, I'm here.
So it's all yours.
All right, thank you. So recess is over. Let's talk schools. My name is Fabian de Espriella. I am with Urbe Studio and part of the WSP team. So starting at the top, why did we do a action plan focused on schools or school zones? And I guess we could say it takes a brave kid in most cases to walk to school. And in a more serious response, I guess it's to set a path to prevent deaths and serious injury crashes on streets around Broward County schools. So in looking at countywide, 22% of students are currently bused to school, which underscores a huge opportunity for the remainder 78% of students and their families who could potentially benefit from walking or biking to schools. And so having safer environments would perhaps entice them to take that walk in the mornings. So let's move to findings. So for the analysis that we developed for this action plan, we looked at KSI crash data between 2018 and 2022, and some environmental characteristics, which included some proximity to HIN, presence of school crossing guards, and so forth, within a half-mile radius, which is a 10-minute walk from over 300 schools in the county. And so we learned that, first, school zones are working, because there are very few crashes involving children under 19 within school zones during flashing hours. So this is in response to the previous question, if we looked at some demographic data, yes, we did specifically to understand if, what was the, I guess, severity or risk of kids or children under 19 around schools on streets as they walk to school. So, but on the flip side, over 70% of schools are within a half-mile or 10-minute walk from high-stress facilities. Over 40% of all KSI crashes happened within a half a mile or 10-minute walk from a school. Over 90% of all motorist KSI crashes happened within a half-mile or 10-minute walk from a school as well. And 1/3 of all pedestrian KSI crashes in the county are tagged within a quarter mile, that's a 5-minute walk, from a school or a park, which really puts in perspective, the current conditions around schools and reinforces the purpose and need of our work and why we did an action plan around schools. So as part of the analysis, we scored all schools according to specific criteria. And along with input from the TWG, we identified priority locations for safety improvements. And as part of this effort, we also developed a dashboard which hopefully it's going to be a useful tool for decision making for all municipalities as you use the other tools that this overall plan is going to provide. So there were cities that ranked highest in the assessment based on the number of schools per municipality that recorded the most KSI crashes within that half-mile radius for schools, from schools. And the three cities that came at the top were the city of Fort Lauderdale, Oakland Park, and Plantation. And so as we developed a prioritization mechanism or methodology, we identified three schools for, as you know, as part of this prioritization process, where we wanted to implement or create a prototype of a plan, of a concept plan, so that we could guide or provide guidance on how municipalities could address safety issues around schools. So Driftwood Elementary Middle in Hollywood, Oakland Park Elementary in Oakland Park, and Northside Elementary in Fort Lauderdale were the three schools chosen to advance in terms of developing these concept plans. So we laid out safety countermeasures within the district boundary for each of these three schools to address roadway safety issues. And these concept plans, you know, were really meant to be a starting point so that municipalities and partner agencies could start exploring potential implementation strategies. So, you know, there's a lot of things that were included in these concept plans that are just the beginning to advance conversations, and because there's items that require further study and so forth. But the range of countermeasures that we use to address these issues can be categorized on speed management measures, technology, operations, safety, multimodal design. So we really utilized a range of countermeasures which are very context based to address the issues in each of these three schools. And from a policy perspective,
Time's up.
all right.
So, let me ask you a question while this is up here. I just put it in. Oh, I didn't hit send in Slido. The statistic up top says 42.5% of all KSI crashes occur within a 10-minute walk from school. Then down a little more, it says 95.86 occurred within a half-mile radius, which we're saying is the 10-minute walk. Is the upper statistic just for pedestrians and bicyclists? The 42.5%?
The 42, that's for all KSI. It's all of them.
So then down below it says 95% of all motorist crashes occurred within a half-mile school.
So that's only, it discards pedestrians. So it's all vehicles, right? So it pulls out bike and ped.
But our bike and ped crashes total less than 20% of all the KSI crashes, correct? So somehow the numbers aren't, I don't see how they work.
We can look further into the numbers and I can clarify that.
Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking the upper one might be that the pedestrian bike crashes might be more concentrated around schools. So, and I guess there's another question with this coverage. It looks like we have schools everywhere. So it's not as if the schools are a magnet for KSI crashes. It's just there's a broad geographic distribution. Any thoughts on that?
Correct. You know, when we talk about these top cities having a concentration of schools with high concentration of KSI crashes, in a way it's reflected in the top schools that we chose, but it's hard to identify because of the size of the cities and so forth. But it's just where these clusters are happening.
Right.
And it's because, you know, some cities are larger than others as well.
Okay, time's up. So
Next. Oh, Michael's back.
Me again. Speeds. What do we want to know about speeds? Okay, we all know that speeds is kind of the most important thing that we're talking about. Of all the action plans, mine is the winner.
I'm sorry.
So, and it's cross, it goes across everything. So here's what we did. The crash data doesn't really have a lot of speed stuff. And we know that speed is really important to fatalities and KSLs. And so I'll tell you what we did. We said, how can we figure out, is there a way to back into how fast drivers were going when they crashed? Because if we knew how fast drivers were going, and I apologize to all, the speed subcommittee, you heard me say this before and again and again and again. So if we back into knowing how fast the vehicles are going, then we can do that we'd have a better understanding of what to do. And so what we did is we worked with RIDIS data and TomTom data, which are sort of big data sets. And we got the operating speed, which is the 85th percentile speed for each incident. I think we just looked at 2022 because there's a whole bunch of them for each incident. And we figured out how fast, or with a reasonable expectation about how fast the traffic was going at that time of the incident. And then we could identify each speed, each KSI with a speed. And then there's a fun little CMF, which is a crash mitigation factor in the highway safety manual that says if you lower your operating speed by 5 miles an hour, the resultant crashes would go down by X percentage. Varies. And so we were able to calculate, we did some math, and we ended up with, it's on the bottom left-hand corner, with that if we get the drivers to go 5 miles an hour slower, then we're going to reduce fatalities by about a third, maybe more, and this helps out our ultimate, well, one of our larger goals, which is the benefit cost analysis for this whole project. And so, Christine, we kept saying, well, we have to have a target of 2050 or 2085, or when we're all dead or whatever, and it has to be reduced by a certain percentage. And with this kind of math, we can figure out what that percentage is. And that helps in our cost benefit. And then jumping over to the recommendations. So we just put on the list a whole bunch of countermeasures that we know that address speed, that is known to address speed: roundabouts, narrowing lanes. This is interesting. The third one says produce countywide speed maps. So because we have this ability now to map, we have this ability to map every operating speed, like the 85th percentile on the whole county. And James and Fazil are going to produce these maps. And when you talk about accountability, so who was the question? Somebody asked, well, how do you measure success? Can't ask that. Well, what we can do is we can now, every year, we just go into the RIDIS data and put in some numbers. There's a formula now that we created. And so they can produce the maps, and we can say, wow, we've actually lowered the 85th percentile on all of these corridors, or on overall. We can do a big number. So retimed traffic signals at night, Rassam has got a whole program about what he's going to do. Plant more trees. Everyone loves trees. MPO is going to look for legislation to have more speed cameras, because we know speed cameras work. The last recommendation, 15 seconds, is MPO is going to work with the municipalities to get some lower speed zones. And then the first recommendation is to adopt the FDOT's context-based approach to road design, which is the concept classification target speed matrix thing, which is a whole nother discussion about what that means. But if you design roads, you understand what a target speed is.
All right, Michael, done. Okay, so
Clarifying questions.
Clarifying questions.
Somebody wants to know what our target speed is.
2 minutes. And once again, if you're online and you would like to submit a question, please visit slido.com. The code is 3522618.
That's going about the school one previously. There was a stat about,
Wait, I have to cede my time.
okay, if no one has questions for that. There was a stat about no school crossing guards within 17% of school zones.
No, that would be no crossing guards, you know, in 17.5% within we use that half-mile radius analysis around all of the schools in the county, so it's accounting for that.
So 17% of schools do not have crossing guards within their school zones. That's not meaning a literal flashing school zone. That's meaning like a
Guard.
area around the school, I guess.
Right,
Yeah.
the crossing guard with the flasher and so forth. But we accounted for crossing guards as a different characteristic, and then the flashers as a different, separately. We looked at both of those separately.
Crossing guard is a person.
No, yeah, I know. But yeah, I guess, yeah, it's just question, like, is there a need for a crossing guard? Like, there's a signalized intersection there and there isn't one. I guess that one opens more questions to me of like, why do 17% not have it? But
Brad, you can bring the comment up when you.
Crossing guards are funded through municipalities, and it could be, I mean, this is, we don't know for sure, but it could be a function of there not being funding at the city for the crossing guard.
Okay, let's hold this for 14 more minutes.
All right, technology.
Right. Good afternoon. I'm Catherine Tellez with Fair and Peers and worked on the technology safety action plan. So you might be wondering, what is a technology safety action plan? And when we think about technology as it relates to safety, it's really looking at a wide range of sensors and wireless and wired communications technology. And it's things that can target infrastructure. It's things that can be embedded in a vehicle. And it can be even things that kind of bridge the two, such as something that might be in your cell phone to help provide you alerts. So when we started the technology plan, we really looked at it through the safe system lens and trying to figure out what different technologies are out there, and then how do they relate to the different aspects of safety. So we kind of did a big literature review, and then we met with the focus group to try and understand what's already happening in Broward County. What have you all tried? What has worked? What's not working? Where can we kind of amplify those efforts? And then we came up with, I don't know the final count, maybe 50 or 60 sort of technologies that are in various levels of deployment, either within the county, with the state, nationwide, and kind of did a deeper dive of this current status in Broward County and then what the applications could be within the plan. So just some examples of existing technology that's already being employed here in the county. Wrong way vehicle detection on some of the interstates. We have leading pedestrian intervals at a number of intersections. We have automated speed enforcement in school zones. And so really the technology plan kind of weaves together all the other plans. I know Michael said safety was the most important, which, if we can get the speeds down, that's true. But of all the plans, the technology plan it's the glue that holds it all together and kind of touches all of the other plans. We all like to think ours is the most important. So we identified a host of things. Some of them are things that though that, no one government entity at the local level really has control over, such as mandating different safety technologies within vehicles. But there are things at the local level of requiring fleet vehicles to come equipped with all of the latest and greatest safety devices. So we identified some actions to help jurisdictions, as they're upgrading fleet vehicles, to really think about some of those safety enhancements that can be incorporated. And then we also have to think through some of the sort of legislative, political type barriers. Red light cameras and speed cameras are a sort of a prime example. They can be great, but there's also a lot of controversy around them. And so with the speed cameras right now, that's just allowed to be deployed in school zones. And there's that legislative barrier to deploying it much more widely. And so there's a host of other strategies as well where there are those sort of legislative issues. So there is talk at the national level about requiring that new vehicles come, fully equipped with automatic braking systems and speed governors and other things. Will that be widely deployed anytime soon? Maybe not. So then the rest of the plan really focused on things that we had a little bit more control over. We identified things that were kind of already happening and then ways that we could amplify those efforts through the plan. So Broward County right now is going through a near miss pilot project. So this is using cameras and AI technology at various locations to really understand some of the underlying root causes of crashes. Because although a lot of crashes happen in the grand scheme of things, they are somewhat rare. And so we want to make sure we're not waiting for a crash to happen to take measures to sort of proactively address those crashes. So looking at enhancing that program and then using the technologies that we already have, such through signal timing, we can have better speed progression on corridors. We flagged a number of locations where we could go out and implement leading pedestrian intervals to improve some of those pedestrian safety outcomes. And then just following some of the school speed zone pilots to see how those go and then, learn lessons from those and then deploy that a little bit more widely. And then we also noted in the plan to not become over-reliant on technology. Just things like power outages can shut down all of your communication systems. And we want to make sure that in the aftermath of a storm, if power is out, not all of our safety goes away. So I view the technology piece as kind of the icing on the cake, but we really do want those sort of self-enforcing roads with the technology really just helping to enhance those outcomes. So happy to answer any clarifying questions.
Catherine, kudos. She took transit here all the way from Orlando, connected to the Broward County bus to get here to the MPO today. So gold star.
I like the bus and I like trains. Plus the bus is only $2, way cheaper than an Uber.
So if you could go a little more into some of the recommendations. And I think in the document, I don't know that it shows up here, but you made some recommendations for where we could install certain technology. I guess it's in the middle there, right? The signalization strategies.
Yeah, so we identified a number of corridors where the posted speed limit's greater than 45 miles an hour, and we had a good density of traffic signals where we could really look at different signal timing plans to encourage a safer progression speed. A number of locations, our signals are timed to kind of encourage the platoon to go faster than the posted speed limit, especially during off-peak hours and at nighttime when we're seeing a lot of those KSI crashes. So we flagged a number of those locations. We also noted a number of locations that don't currently have leading pedestrian intervals where we do have pedestrian-related crashes. So those are just locations to implement LPIs. And then bicycle detection as well, as the low stress network is being further implemented, really making some strides there on implementing bicycle detection to make sure that bicyclists have sufficient time to get through intersections.
And not to put you too much on the spot, but has Broward County or have we tried some of these already in Broward?
So we
Oh,
know.
time's up.
Okay,
Hold that question.
all right.
Short answer is yes, but we'll come back.
Yep.
Pedestrian bicycle safety action plan. I started, okay. The way to make it safer to walk and or cycle is to have more people walk and or cycle. It's called safety in numbers. The acronym is SIN. So we can't use that acronym, but so that's the goal. So the question is, how do you do it? And one of the answers is getting into our program recommendations is that if what we sort of looked at around the county, and what we found is that we found a lot of gaps in the cycling and or walking network. So you'd have greenways that would go and they would be severed by a big road and they would continue on the other side of the big road. You would have greenways or bike lanes that went along a road and then they would suddenly end at 300 feet before the intersection. NACTO has a nice guideline, that a whole recommendation that says don't give up at the intersection, which is exactly this. And so the program is very simple, or the recommendations are very simple. Establish 2 programs. One is a greenway and bike by gap program. Well, that should be the opposite of gap. It should be the gap reduction program or something like that. And then the other one is a sidewalk gap reduction program. And the sidewalk is, okay, fine, everyone's got sidewalks. One of the big things that we've learned and sort of we know about doing this is that the problem with sidewalks, especially in sort of suburbanish communities and kind of not real big cities, is that, it's not really, it's kind of left up to the homeowner to fix it. And this really has negative implications for a lot of places because they just don't do it. And they don't maintain it and so forth and so on. And so we're saying, look, you really need to you got to hire somebody, got them on call. You got to have a program of regular, you go around and you evaluate your streets and you see what the asphalt and the pavement looks like. Well, you got to do the same thing with the sidewalks and the gaps. And so it's essentially just take care of your gaps. And if you close the gaps, then you increase the network. And once you increase the network, you increase the ability to move around. One of the things, like Catherine's taking all the credit because she took the bus, and that's cool. And the bus leaves her across the road at the park and ride. And so, we made a joke when she was on the bus. We said, well, if she can't actually cross the street, then she could phone into the meeting from over there. Because, that's a lot of what this is. It's like, wow, we could take the bus. And then we get there and we're like, where'd we go? So that's it. Since I have a minute and 41 seconds, you gotta wait for your 2 minutes. No, I said, look, so I'll sort of explain these charts on the right, the circles, the 57, 53, 91. And so what we did is I'm always looking for denominators. Lots of time crash stats are about numerators, like there were 87 million, whatever. And it's like, okay, what does that mean? And so what we did is we took pedestrians and we took cyclists and we took their KSIs and we then divided per mile. So we took the number of fatalities and serious injuries, and the road is whatever, how many, 10 miles, 5 by 10. And then we said, well, if it's a 1-lane road, because in the crash data, it's divided up into 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 4 to 5, whatever it is, 1, 4, and 6, and 2, 4, and 6, right? And so we said, well, if 2-lane which is a 1-lane road, right? Is that's one. Then how many times per mile is a 4-lane versus a 2-lane? So that's a factor. So, and that's what you're saying. So a 6-lane road sees as a factor 57 more times pedestrian KSIs per mile. And a bicycle sees 30 times more, yes, KSIs per mile than a 1-lane road. Clarifying questions, please.
James, so if it's fine, I'm just gonna go directly to the 20 minutes.
No, hold on. Give him 2 minutes because I overtalked some of it. So how does this bike ped plan relate to what Josette is doing with the multimodal mobility plan at Broward County?
Excellent question. So we have been in full communication with Josette and her team at Marlin Engineering, and we have chosen our our program to basically, we said this is kind of the priority program, but Josette has the list of locations. So, you know, they've done a whole lot of work about identifying where these things are. And so we just saying, as part of this, you take the first bunch and go.
Right? Any other questions? Since Mike's up there.
Yeah.
You had a question about targets.
Oh, the target speeds. So who asked about target speeds?
There's a Slido question.
Okay.
Anonymous eyes.
It better not be from FDOT. No, well, so target speed is, so it's kind of it's a relatively new concept. But the idea is that, how far back should I go? Okay.
We only have 20 minutes. Though.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I know. That's because we put it in, but we started doing this like 25 years ago. So speeds historically have been set reactively. So, you know, people are driving on the road, you go out there with a radar gun or an ATR machine, and you say, well, they're going this fast. And then you set your speed accordingly. Then you say, well, that should be the 85th percent. That the 85th percentile should sort of be the posted speed. It's kind of how it goes. And then, but that has come under criticism for whatever reason. And then, so the industry have invented something called target speed, which is said, we would actually like to decide how fast people should be going, not just saying. It's kind of like my joke when I'm doing speed humps and people say, well, the snow plows, this is in the north, snow plows couldn't go over them. And I said, look, the snowplow operator's ideal street is an airport runway because they can just go. And it's kind of like that with speeds. Like, it's not like you just can't let them drive as fast as they can through neighborhoods. So we're going to have target speeds. So FDOT has a nice context classification because they have context C 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. And most of Broward counties in 4, 5, and 6. No 5s. Well, 4 anyway. And it's 3 commercial. Yeah. And they have a nice little chart that has, well, we think that drivers should be going this speed in this context. And it's a range. And then, so we, as part of this plan, said, we'll use that range and we chose an aspirational speed. And then you work backwards to how do you redesign your corridor so that, like, how do you time your signals so that you can hit that? You can get into green wave. Portland, Oregon, for example, they time their signals downtown so you can go 15 miles an hour. It's one-way street. So, you know, whether signal timing or through speed humps or traffic calming or lane, whatever. So the target speed is this. It's proactive. Does that answer the question on this?
One more question for you, Michael. At what speed category has the highest actual number of KSIs? Should we focus improvements on lower speed roadways despite higher survival chances?
What speed category? Ooh, I'd have to look at that chart. We actually know.
Yeah, it's around 45.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And surprisingly, yeah, the highest KSI is not at the 55, it's in that 45 mile per hour range.
Yeah, and also I don't think it make it on this thing, but we found like huge disconnects between roads that were like 6-lane roads that were signed 30. Guess what? No one's driving 30. And so you start to see, and this kind of starts to explain, well, if the 45 is kind of the highest KSI rate or speed bucket, maybe it's because they're mixed together with sort of supposedly lower speed street. That's a good question.
Should we focus improvement efforts on lower speed roadways? Or higher speed roadways? Here's the lower speed roadway here.
I always say solve the worst first. But I think that, in Secowitz kind of things, like where you have a whole bunch of neighborhood roads and local streets, you have a certain percentage of fatalities and capsize there. So you have to tackle those. I mean, that's an interesting thing, because if you're dealing with, maybe the way to answer that is to approach the roads that are out of balance first. And that's where you have the high speeds on the lower speed roads. So the 6-lane roads that are assigned 30, maybe those should be addressed. And by out of balance also, I think that if you have roads that are way the capacity ratio, the VC ratio is really low, which means you have fewer vehicles per lane on a road. Those mean that you have a bigger differential, or you have the ability to speed. We were out at, what was it, Rock Island Road or something like that. And it's kind of a lowish volume street, but it still has 4 lanes and a median. And I mean, I clocked people going 85. And because they could. And, there's no signals out. I mean, there's signals. I don't know where the signals are. I couldn't see one. And so maybe it's those sort of the ones that are out of balance, the ones that have way too much capacity for the volume that they're processing. And that could also that could also go by time of day, because you have some roads that maybe they're built for a particular time capacity envelope in the peak, but then off peak they're super low. And so and that gets into, because we address, and this is the technology thing that Catherine's talking about, then we can get into signal timing. And I think one of the things on there was retime traffic signals at night. So the things that are out of balance. Or there at the end of the slide.
Fabian, are you on? We've got one for schools. Would it be a good idea to separate schools by elementary school, middle school, and high school? For example, a 7-year-old might not be able to walk as far as a 15-year-old. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. I would say also that the catchment area, so the district boundaries for schools are different depending, the catchment area is a lot wider for a high school. Unfortunately, our kind of analysis methodology didn't segment, elementary, high schools and middle, but we did create a dashboard that allows as a tool that allows you all to kind of select whether you want to look at a high school, at a middle, or elementary, and you could look the analysis, the crash, the KSI crash data within that half-mile watershed that we used as our measure, and you should be able to look at those different conditions on a school by school basis, which I think it's going to be a useful tool for municipalities as they make decisions on how to approach safety projects around schools.
And I want to go back, was it Brad's question about the school guards, crossing guards?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that, I mean, junior high or high schools, whatever they call them, middle school, whatever, would they have crossing guards as much as elementary?
Our understanding is that they do, even high schools have crossing guards, but it's the funding mechanism for crossing guards. It's a thing of the cities to handle. And so 17% of schools that, of the 300, not having crossing guards could be a function of that, could be a function that they may be high schools as well.
And Paula you were going to say something on that?
No, from experience, I know that it's expected that high schoolers are a little bit more knowledgeable and should know how, should know. So it's assumed that it's not really needed for high schoolers. And I agree, funding is a big issue as well. But also what I'm hearing from the school boards is that, high schoolers are expected to know how to safely walk.
Yeah, and that's where I'm wondering, goes back to that previous question about splitting out the schools by grade level they cover.
And James, I would love to get back to your previous question of the 95% and the 77%.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Those are not talking about KSI crashes. The KSI crashes are the 2,135 crashes. And so those account for 95% of the schools. So those crashes, those 2,000 crashes account happening within that half-mile watershed of 95% of the schools. So motorist vehicle crashes are happening within a 10-minute walk of 95% of schools. That's kind of the angle where that's going. Same thing with the non-motorist crashes that we're talking here. It's not 77% of the crashes, it's 452 non-motorist crashes that are really happening within 77.24 of the schools in the county.
I need to think about that a little more.
So that the actions, James, if we were to target actions within a half a mile of a school, we would capture 95% and 77% is what I'm hearing.
So where's the 42.5% then? That's also within a 10-minute walk.
Because that's the number of KSI. So that is really talking about the 42.5% of KSI crashes within that 10-minute, because that's accounting for crashes. But these 95 and 77 are percentages of schools that are experiencing those types of crashes within that half mile.
And I guess I would just ask, because we've finalized this write-up, that we clarify that. Because going back to 2,135, we would have had almost 5,000 KSI crashes in our overall area. So you're doing a subset of that of the 2,135. So yeah,
correct.
I just want to make sure we're doing comparisons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that we want to protect children. And I think that's one reason why we're starting the camera enforcement with schools, right? It's very supported to protect children. So I think Fabian was really smart to really show us that if we invest in improvements, safety improvements around schools, we're going to be catching a lot of the greater need beyond just kids. We're going to be a greater need will be affected because we're going to catch whatever percentage we want to catch, 77%. Of those crashes will go down if we do those improvements around schools. So let's just start there. We'll save the kids and then hopefully it'll also save some adults too, right?
So there's a question online. So target speeds have to come with updated designs or redesigns of the corridors?
Yes. Yes, the answer is yes. This is not the magic wand. You can't say, oh, it's now going to be 35. You have to actually do the work. So the way the target speed works, or the way we're recommending, or the way it's done, is that these target speeds are, let's call them aspirational. And you say in this context that the target speed will be, let's start with 35 or 30. And then I don't know, can't remember. And so then going forward, all of your projects, in fact, Christine, because she's actually having to do the work, is in all the 11 corridors, we've assigned an aspirational target speed, which is according to the new FDOT, guidelines. And so what you do is that target speed then sets the design speed, which sets the posted speed, that all should be equal. But, if we remember, I was talking about these roads that are 6-lane roads and they're posted 30, but we're getting speeds of like 45. Well, you can't just say, well, it's going to be somehow magically 30 because that's the target. And it has to maybe for 45, we should try for next year 40. And then we could start cranking it down to get to 30. And so maybe it's a stepped process. But each of these things have to come with countermeasures. And we know what the countermeasures do in terms of so maybe the first thing to do is narrow the lanes. And then the second, and put in a median and then retime some lights. And then the second thing to do is that, going forward is then maybe we go for ultimately raised elements, something like that.
So we have 3 minutes left, and Ken, our member of the public, I want to give him the time to say something. And Richard Tornes, the 31st Avenue is an example of that ratcheting down of speeds. It was ratcheted down 5 miles per hour, and we're looking at ratcheting it down another 5, if I remember.
Well, you're thinking about getting it down to 30, is that from 35? Because it's
Yeah, but-
35 now.
But it used to be 40, right? And
It used to be 45.
Oh, so 45 to
And
35.
then the lane widths were reduced to 10 feet, and we had to reduce the speed down to 35. So I'm not sure what the vertical elements are and what parameters you need to make sure that the speed is safe for them to drive over at a certain miles per hour.
Well, come to the public meeting tomorrow night and find out, right?
All right.
Let me answer that. Let me answer the speed question. So just looking at the fatalities in 2022, the highest number of fatalities were in the 40-mile-an-hour speed category. And then there were 60, and then there were 28 at 50 and only 20 at 30. But, and here's the rub, is that the crash modification factor for 40 is 0.36. And the crash modification for 30 is 0.22, which means that, and this actually answers the question. 0.22 means if you reduce it by 5 miles an hour, you'll get a 78% reduction. 0.2 is the inverse of 100 minus 20, so 78. And so at 40 miles an hour, it's at 36. If you reduce it, what's 100 minus 36? 64, right? So you get a bigger bang for your buck at lower speed, right? Huh? That's the CMF. That's the CMF.
Ross, Mike, please.
Sorry about that. Now, what you're saying is that if you have speed limits of 25 and you reduce it by 5, you have a higher reduction in KSI than if you reduce it from 45 to 40?
That's what the CMF says.
I need to look into that CMS much closer.
And it may be a relation of the percentage versus the absolute number. So you're having a lot more at 40.
Right, because if you go from 20 to, let's just do easy math. If you go from 20 to 15, that's 25% reduction, right? Correct? But if you go from 80 to 75, is that an easy math? I don't know. I picked a big. If you go from 40 to 35, that's only a 12.5% reduction.
Okay, so you're looking at from the percentage reduction.
So you know what?
The 5 months.
Remember when when my dad would teach me to drive and he's trying to get me to drive slower? Good luck. And he said, if you're driving 70 and you go 75, you're not, the time differential in the amount of time the shorter time it takes you to get somewhere is less than if you're going 20 and you speed up to 25. because 20 to 25, you're gonna get to 25% more faster. But if you go from 70 to 75, he was trying to get me to slow down. And I retained that math and refused to accept it.
Right,
Michael,
Ken?
to the shoulder.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I have another question on the school zones. On the one hand, we have numbers of KSIs within certain range of the school zones. But in that blue field that's on that slide, it said that KSIs in the school zone during schools with the lights on, the guards there are very rare. So my question is, how many KSIs are involving children going from school? And asking it another way, if that school wasn't there, if it was a strip mall or something, would that high number of KSIs still exist anyway? So are those KSIs really a function of the school being there or not?
Let me throw out a quick statistic. This is James. In the 5-year period that we looked at, while the school flashes were going, there was 1 KSI in 5 years involving a child under 19. But that's only, Mike, help me with the percentage of the day, but it's only a percentage of the day. So it's the rest of the day that there are the other issues with that. So, and Fabian, if you can handle the other part of his question.
Yeah, but the all box here is saying it's that this is only for children under 19 in the school zones during flashing hours. So the county has really experienced very little KSI crashes within this specific segment. Like James was saying, we only had children under 19 during flashing hours, only 1 non-motorist crash that it's registered. And then during the school operating hours, which expands the hours, between 7 and 5 p.m., and that range changes, but there's 4 KSI crashes. So we sliced the children under 19 in within the flashing hours, outside the flashing hours. And that explains why overall we're saying school zones are working. There are not a lot of KSI crashes happening within the school zones when the flashers are working.
Josette?
I think my question would be, is whether the crashes are related to the school or not, would you let your grandkids walk to that school if you know it's very dangerous for your kids?
No.
So it's a chicken or an egg kind of question, I think the goal is to make safe conditions that we don't put children at risk when they're walking to school, regardless of whether or not the safety of the school is really in question. It's really the exposure that we're looking at.
As is the exposure of adults during non-school hours as well. A KSI is a KSI.
Well, thank you, everybody, for keeping the speed going. Christine, you did have 5 minutes for your closing remarks,
35 minutes late, so.
but still, we got it.
All right, thanks again. Next steps, as we alluded to, we are working on the Broward Safety Action Plan Executive Plan to go to the Broward MPO Board, April the 10th for adoption. There'll be a pre-presentation on March 13th to the MPO Board. And so in order to get to those two, I'm trying to wrap up the stakeholder comments right now to get that back to the MPO. And we'd like to disperse that out to you for further comment. I'm hoping March 3rd, we can send that out. I'm kind of looking at Fossil and James. If I can get it to you next Friday is the plan. So that we can give you a 2-week period. The intent would be we'd email it to you and then you could review it and give us comments. The good news is it's going to be less than 40 pages. So hopefully you can take time, maybe a half a day, and just read through it and give me your highlights and comments so that we can have a better deliverable to present to the board for the April adoption. And we're also going to post that on the website for anybody in the public that would like to peruse it. So it'll be on our website. So we'll put that in the email as well if you want to share that with anybody in your city or your municipality that would like to look at it. So a lot of opportunity there. So with that, we have 5 meetings left. I've got some ideas for topics. I'm gonna work with the team to tighten those up, but we finish up in a few months. So really looking forward to getting you all the resources that we talked about, HIN maps and the 8 focus plans. The design manual is coming. Quick build plan is coming. So lots of things are coming. I'm really excited about this year so we can have all these resources to create safer streets together. So thank you. 4:31 adjourned.
Oh, I didn't know if you wanted to mention the public meetings this week too.
Public meeting. Tonight, we're going to be in Plantation. Tomorrow, we're going to be at Lauderdale Lakes. Monday night, we will be at the Palms for 441. Tuesday next week, we'll be at downtown Fort Lauderdale at the Women's Club for East Broward Boulevard. And then next Thursday night, we'll be in Deerfield Beach for Southwest 10th Street.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.